Hello and welcome. My name is Kelli Connor, and I am the host of your podcast today. Today, I'm coming at you from one of my two studios here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And today, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how I started my photography business. So, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in New Hampshire. I went to college in New Hampshire as well, the University of New Hampshire. I graduated in 2011, and I actually went to college for photography. So I have a bachelor's degree in photography. And a little fun fact about me, I actually tried to get sniped into the Masters of Fine Arts program by my painting professor. Because I'm not too shabby, not a bad painter. I can draw, I can paint. Took a lot of sculpting classes, clay, bronze, metalworking, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I've got a really strong background in actually just studio art. I love to draw and paint and things I don't get to do very often anymore. But photography is my passion. I have been taking photography classes since I was in middle school, and I was actually fortunate enough to attend a high school here in New Hampshire that had a really excellent photography program where I got to play with 35 millimeter cameras and some large format cameras and do a lot of my own film developing and processing. And these were the early days of Photoshop as well. So I learned Photoshop in middle school and high school and got a lot more into the technical aspects of digital photography in college. And so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit today about how I got my photography business started and where I am today and what the journey has looked like for me. So, as a child, I used to steal my grandmother's point and shoot camera. I believe it was a Pentax. And I remember taking her camera outside and taking pictures of the flowers and trees. And she used to develop those for me and put them into little photo albums. If you guys are old enough to remember getting pictures developed at like Walmart, getting film developed at, Walmart or CVS, if you got enough film developed, they would give you those free plastic kind of albums. And so I think I still have some of those. But anyways, I remember taking her camera then, and then eventually my mom bought me my own film camera. And I have some really vivid memories of a trip to Canada I took with my grandmother when I was around 12 years old to visit her side of the family that lives in St. John, New Brunswick. And that side of my family, they're all farmers. And so they all have these really beautiful farms. And I have some really awesome pictures I took at 12 years old of cows. So I still have those somewhere. But eventually I, grew up and went to college. And I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist because I also really love the ocean. I snorkel, I swim, I scuba dive, the whole nine yards. And so I went for my first year of college, I went to the University of North Carolina in Wilmington to be a marine biologist. And when I looked at my course load for the first semester, I said, you know what? I'm going to fail out of this program. There was a lot of math classes and, just some really intense courses that I frankly wasn't up for it. I wasn't up for it. I was like, you know what? I would love to be a marine biologist, but I don't want to be a marine biologist bad enough to take some of these classes because my goal was through going through the marine biology program was to get a minor in photography so I could actually do underwater marine photography for, maybe a company like National Geographic or even, scientific kind of studies. A lot of us know now that the photographers that, work for National Geographic, they're no longer employees and they're contractors. And so good thing I changed my mind and changed my course of study because those jobs don't really exist anymore. A lot of those magazines are using, stock photography or, who knows if it's AI these days. But anyways, so I ended up transferring back to New Hampshire, University of New Hampshire, where I got my bachelor's degree in photography. And I actually started my photography business in college, started taking clients in college. And my dream at that point was to be a wedding photographer. And so I did get my degree. I did graduate from University of New Hampshire. But upon graduating, I moved right back to Wilmington, North Carolina, which is where I really started my business and really started to build a client base and learn the ins and outs of running a photography business. And so that year was 2011. I moved down to North Carolina in 2011 and started my business there. I was living in Carolina Beach, North Carolina, which is just a teeny tiny little island off the coast of Wilmington. It's just like a one little bridge that you can take to get there. And if the wind reaches, I think like 25 or 35 miles an hour, which happens kind of a lot down there, the bridge closes and nobody can leave. So I really enjoyed living down there, but I learned very quickly that learning Photoshop in college was great, but nobody taught me anything about running a business. And so I started taking some classes online on how to run a business and really just kind of experimented a lot with trial and error. And I was doing a lot of family portraits. I was doing some high school seniors. I was doing weddings. I was doing a lot of associate shooting for other wedding photographers. And I was traveling all over North and South Carolina, doing all types of photography sessions. My policy at the time was if somebody wants to give me money, I'll do the job, whatever that might look like. And so, boudoir photography, as some of you may know, you might not know, these days I do specialize only in boudoir photography. And frankly, you could not pay me enough to photograph a wedding or, a corporate event or corporate headshots or even furniture. I photographed a lot of commercial photography for these really amazing craftsmen in New Hampshire for a few years. But anyways, these days my focus is boudoir photography, but I had a long journey to get here and to figure out why I wanted to niche down and why I chose boudoir as the niche for my photography business. So, in the early days of starting my business, when I was doing a lot of weddings and doing a lot of traveling for weddings, the coast of North Carolina and really kind of North Carolina in general is a big military area. So it's very transient. There's a lot of people in and out. It's also a very popular destination wedding location. A lot of people want to get married on the coast of North Carolina or South Carolina. Beautiful beaches, beautiful streets, historic streets. So really just a lovely spot to do portrait photography and do weddings. But what I was quickly finding, as a young woman in the photography industry is that my clients, my female clients were coming to me, whether it was the moms of the families that I was photographing or the brides for the weddings that I was photographing. They were coming to me and saying, "Hey, I know you're doing our wedding or I know you're doing our family portraits, but would you be interested in doing a boudoir session for me?" And to be completely honest, I didn't even know what boudoir was. I remember looking it up and figuring out like what is this? Like what are people talking about? And I realized that in photography school in college, I actually was doing boudoir sessions for my friends and as projects for my classes without even really knowing it. It's very common in art school to draw and paint nude figures, but we also did a lot of nude photography in my photography program in college. And I had a lot of friends in college. I was in a sorority, and I had a lot of friends in college that would ask me, "Hey, can you take some pictures of me for my boyfriend for Valentine's Day or his birthday or whatever?" So I actually found out a few years later that I was already doing boudoir photography and I didn't even know it. And so this is just one of the, funny ways that the universe kind of puts things in our lap is, all these years later, my clients were coming to me saying, "Hey, could you do a boudoir session for me?" And so I was like, I could probably figure it out. So, I bought lighting, I took classes, I studied up on posing and skin retouching, the things that when you're photographing a family or you're photographing weddings, the things that you don't really need to know. And so I remember my first few boudoir sessions. I rented a hotel room at this place. It used to be called the City Club in Wilmington, North Carolina. I don't know if it's still around or if, it's something else now, but the City Club was a historic hotel. And I remember reaching out to them and booking this one specific suite because they had all these different suites that were themed. And I remember booking this one specific suite for all of my sessions because it was just so adorable. And so that's where I got really my boudoir business started, was in this one little room in a historic hotel in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I loved it. It was so fun, right? We got to, do hair and makeup. I hired a really good friend of mine to do hair and makeup for all my sessions. So I got to hang out with a friend, glam up my client, play dress up, and then take these really beautiful pictures and, listen to music and chat and just have a good time. And it was such a different experience for me as a photographer and as an artist to work with one client one on one in a controlled environment and just connect with another woman. And it was so powerful to me to see the transformation that happened behind the lens for that client. And so one thing led to another. I started advertising for boudoir sessions. And before I knew it, the boudoir sessions were really dominating my calendar. And so, now it's 2024, so it's 13 years later, and I've photographed thousands of women since, and I only do boudoir photography now, which is, it's been a really, really amazing journey, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And so now I'm also helping other photographers grow and build their boudoir business, and that is just as rewarding as working one-on-one with clients. So, some of the challenges that I faced in specializing in boudoir photography was the fear of niching down and was the struggle that I had turning away business from people who are coming to me saying, "Hey, will you photograph my wedding? Will you photograph my family? Will you do this? Will you do that?" And I was really trying to focus on just this one thing. But it was very difficult in the beginning to turn away the income that I could have been making had I taken on those other jobs. But what I learned in my photography business is that in order for us to be really successful, we have to be able to focus on one aspect of our business. And each genre of photography is kind of its own business. And so if you're photographing newborns, headshots, high school seniors, pets, weddings, whatever the case may be, whatever genre you might be photographing, each genre of photography is kind of its own business. And so if you're photographing, say, five different genres, you're essentially having to run five different businesses. And as somebody who runs one business for my photography, I know how difficult that is. And so multiply that times five, and it becomes very clear for me to understand why it's difficult for some photographers to be really successful because they're spread so thin trying to run essentially all these different businesses. There are some genres that you can put under one cap, like families and newborns or maternity and families. But, for something like boudoir, it's not really something that I can advertise alongside family sessions or high school seniors because that can be a turnoff for some clients to see, high school age children and then next to a picture of a woman in lingerie. So it becomes a little bit tricky when we throw boudoir into the mix when it really kind of needs to be segregated off into its own business. Photographing women, for instance, if you're doing, let's say, branding, beauty, maternity, those types of things, it's not uncommon to lump into a business together with a photographer who's also specializing in boudoir. because it might not be so uncommon to see a picture of a maternity client and then a boudoir client next to that. So, beauty, branding, and boudoir is kind of the three B's that can be lumped together and a little easier to run as one business. But as a whole, I always suggest to photographers to really decide, what are you passionate about? Where is your strongest set of skills in regards to the genres of photography? And can you niche down into just one and really become an expert in that? Because your clients are really going to value working with an expert in the field. And I will chat with you guys next time.